heart is the greatest education. Dalai Lama quotes. Essay. Reflections on Humanity, Compassion, and the World through the Dalai Lama's cited wisdom. I didn't choose to become the Dalai Lama. It was a role given to me. The Dalai Lama reflects with his characteristic humility, recalling how, at the tender age of 2 in 1935, he was identified as the 14th incarnation in a lineage tracing back to the 14th century. This wasn't a path he sought, but one thrust upon him by a council of monks who saw in him the reincarnation of his predecessor, a moment that forever altered the course of a boy named Lamo Thondup from a small village in northeastern Tibet. His lack of choice underscores a life sculpted by duty rather than personal ambition, a foundation that shapes his expansive philosophy of service over self. For me, this resonates as a reminder of how often life hands us roles we didn't audition for: parent, caregiver, leader, and how we grow into them not by desire, but by necessity, finding purpose in the unexpected. Turn your moments into motivation. Hit subscribe, and let the power of classic quotes transform your mindset every day. I believe this 21st century can be much happier than the last, he asserts with a quiet confidence, envisioning a world elevated by genuine friendship and mutual care, particularly between Tibetans and Chinese, a bond he deems essential for peace in a region fractured by conflict since China's annexation of Tibet in 1950. This isn't blind optimism, but a deliberate call to action, rooted in his decades-long hope for reconciliation after witnessing the pain of exile and the Cultural Revolution's scars. He sees this century as a canvas for humanity to paint with compassion, a vision that challenges the cynicism of our times. I find myself inspired by this, imagining how small acts, like bridging a divide with a neighbor, could ripple outward, turning his hope into reality. Even with all of life's comforts, good food, shelter, a companion, people can still fall into despair when tragedy comes, he observes, his voice carrying the weight of countless conversations with the privileged and the broken alike. This insight cuts through the illusion that material security is a shield against sorrow, a truth he's distilled from meeting refugees who lost everything and wealthy donors who confessed to emptiness. It's a poignant reminder that happiness is an inner garden, cultivated through resilience and connection, not a gift bestowed by external abundance. I've seen this in my own life, times when a full fridge and a cozy home couldn't quiet the ache of losing a loved one, teaching me that peace must be forged within. Open-minded people are drawn to Buddhism because the Buddha urged investigation, not blind faith, he notes with a tone of approval, celebrating a tradition that invites questions over commandments. He credits this intellectual freedom, rooted in the Buddha's 5th century BCE teachings, to why his message echoes across cultures, from Himalayan monasteries to Western lecture halls. It's a philosophy that aligns with our era's hunger for reason, offering a spiritual path that doesn't demand surrender of the mind. This strikes me as a gift in a world often split by dogma, encouraging me to approach life with curiosity rather than certainty. Religious and political institutions should be separate, though I've lived both, a hypocrisy I admit. He confesses with a chuckle, reflecting on his dual role as Tibet's spiritual guide and political figurehead until his retirement from the latter in 2011. His candor peels back the layers of a man who, for decades, balanced the sacred and the secular, leading a government in exile from India while guiding millions in meditation. This tension between ideals and reality isn't just a historical footnote. It's a human struggle he owns with disarming honesty. For me, this hits home. I've felt it in moments when my values clash with the roles I've had to play, like managing a team at work while yearning for solitude. His admission invites us to embrace our own contradictions, to see them as part of growth rather than failure. Take Emma, a friend who once led a local charity. She was a devout pacifist, yet her role required lobbying politicians, a task she found at odds with her quiet faith. Inspired by the Dalai Lama's openness, she shared her unease with her team, saying, "I'm not built for this, but I'll do it for us." Her honesty didn't fracture her leadership, it strengthened it, forging a bond of trust. Or consider David, a pastor I met years ago, who was pressured to endorse a political candidate from his pulpit. He resisted, citing his belief in keeping faith pure, but the strain of defying his congregation's expectations wore him down. When he learned of the Dalai Lama's stance, he found solace, eventually stepping back to focus on spiritual guidance alone. The Dalai Lama's critique isn't just institutional, it's a personal call to live authentically, a balance he achieved by relinquishing political power to preserve his spiritual core. Meditation and Buddhist techniques are for everyone. Christian monks and nuns use them to grow in compassion, he shares, his voice warm with inclusivity. He points to examples like Jesuit priests in Europe who've adopted mindfulness to deepen their prayer, a testament to the universal human need for peace that transcends religious borders. This practicality, offering tools without dogma, extends his reach to skeptics and believers alike, a bridge I've crossed myself when meditation steadied me through sleepless nights. Governments can't do much. They're too bound by short-term goals, he argues, his skepticism honed by watching leaders from Washington to Beijing stumble over bureaucracy and election cycles. He contrasts this with the organic unity of common sense, a grassroots force he's seen bind communities in exile. It's a perspective that challenges our faith in top-down solutions, pushing me to look closer at the power of collective will. Computers make me blank out, he admits with a laugh, a rare glimpse of vulnerability that paints him not as an untouchable sage, but as a man of 89, still puzzled by the digital age. It's a charming crack in his wisdom, reminding me that even the profoundest minds have their limits. The self-immolation of Tibetans is a practice of nonviolence. They sacrifice themselves, not others, he explains, his tone heavy, as he frames the tragic acts of over 150, since 2009, as a desperate yet peaceful cry against oppression. This reflection, born from witnessing his people's pain, balances sorrow with admiration for their restraint, a complexity that challenges simplistic judgments. I'm confident I'll return to Tibet in my lifetime, he declares, his exile since 1959 a fleeting shadow against history's lessons, like the Soviet Union's collapse in 1991. This unshaken faith, rooted in decades of resilience, fuels his vision of a free Tibet, a hope I find contagious even from afar. If people think I have miracle powers, that's nonsense. I'm just a human being, he insists, his bluntness cutting through the mystique others project onto him. He's a monk, not a magician, a stance that grounds his global influence in raw humanity, a lesson in humility I try to carry into my own small sphere. I want to be a pure spiritual leader, free of politics. It's a selfish wish to protect my tradition, he admits, revealing a strategic depth beneath his gentle exterior. This isn't about dodging responsibility, but safeguarding a 600-year legacy from the mud of worldly power, a choice that echoes his 2011 devolution of authority. China's culture is rich, but its people want change. Democracy and freedom are coming, he predicts, his eyes on a global tide he believes will sweep even Beijing's iron grip aside. His optimism, tempered by years of observing China's rise, rests on the people's quiet yearning, a faith that stirs my own hope for justice. When I hear of tortured Tibetan refugees, I feel anger, but it passes. I seek deeper calm, he shares, his voice tracing a path from rage to peace forged over decades of meditation. These stories, of beatings and imprisonment since the 1950s, test his resolve, yet his discipline offers a model for transforming pain into purpose. Education must teach compassion and harmony from kindergarten to university, beyond religion, he urges, a vision he's championed through initiatives like the Mind and Life Institute since 1987. This blueprint for a secular ethics curriculum isn't just theory. It's a radical reimagining of how we raise generations, one I wish I'd encountered as a child. I don't push conversion. It can confuse. Stay with your own faith, he advises, his caution a nod to the chaos of uprooting spiritual foundations. This respect for personal paths mirrors my own reluctance to abandon familiar beliefs, even when they're tested. Politicians and democracies chase votes, not vision. They're short-sighted, he quips, his critique sharpened by years of watching electoral games overshadow enlightenment. It's a jab that makes me question the leaders I've trusted, urging a deeper look at their motives. If I'd stayed in Lassalle without Chinese rule, I'd have been a rigid traditionalist, he muses, grateful that exile since 1959 broke that mold. This rare hypothetical reveals a man shaped by circumstance into a global thinker, a flexibility I admire and aspire to. Combining Buddhist science with modern science is my contribution. No other Lama has done it, he says proudly, tracing this to a childhood spent tinkering with telescopes in Lassalle. This fusion, sparked in dialogues with neuroscientists since the 1980s, bridges millennia of wisdom with today's discoveries, a legacy that fascinates me as a blend of past and present. Mischievous people have always been around, thousands of years past and future, he shrugs, his nonchalance a dismissal of petty disruptions in humanity's vast narrative. It's a perspective that helps me let go of small frustrations. The world belongs to humanity, not leaders or kings, he proclaims, his bold claim a rejection of hierarchy for collective ownership. This cornerstone of his worldview challenges me to see beyond borders and titles, to claim my part in a shared story. Violent suppression can't last. Look at Eastern Europe after 1989, he points out, his confidence anchored in history's evidence. This lesson from the Berlin Wall's fall to Romania's revolution bolsters his faith, and mine, in resilience over force. Teaching too long exhausts me, he grins, his admission of fatigue a human touch that softens his sage-like image. It's a relatable limit, one I've felt after long days of explaining ideas. Tibet's struggle won't die with me, it's too strong, he asserts, his rejection of despair a lifeline for his people. This enduring hope, forged through exile, inspires me to believe in causes beyond my lifetime. I have no trouble sleeping, he says simply, his peace a quiet testament to a clear conscience. This small detail reveals a calm I strive for amidst life's noise. Climate change is melting the North Pole. Listen to the scientists, he warns, his urgency grounded in data over dogma. His call, echoing reports from the IPCC, pushes me to heed evidence in a warming world. Reality is interdependent, not absolute. It helps me avoid anger, he explains, his lens of interconnectedness a balm for the mind. This philosophy, refined over 60 years of practice, offers me a way to soften my own sharp edges. My rebirth is my decision, not China's, he states firmly, his defiance a stand against Beijing's claims since 2007 to control his succession. This assertion of autonomy rings with a strength that bolsters his moral authority. Meeting the public and spreading harmony is my main commitment, he shares, his passion undimmed though he downplays Dalai Lama as a mere temporal title. This life's fuel, connecting with people, mirrors my own joy in shared moments. I never dream I'm the Dalai Lama, he laughs, his quirky self-awareness a nod to his grounded identity. It's a humility that keeps him real, even to himself. People tell me my thoughts make them happier, he notes, his quiet delight in lifting spirits a reward I've felt when words I've shared brighten someone's day. We all live together, so let's live happily, he concludes, his simple yet profound call a vision for a world woven with joy. It's a challenge I take up daily, seeking harmony in the chaos we share.